Well, we're going to explore now a segment of emergence that many people don't realize are going on, but it's coming on like gangbusters. And that is the transhumanist expectations. What on earth do we mean about that? Well, it turns out that there are a series of technologies that are advancing so fast. In fact, they're each helping the other to advance, in effect. 4 of them that are changing our lives hourly. And one of these, of course, is genetics and microbiology. No surprise. We're all aware of the fact that they're making strides, especially in the information sciences, to try to understand switching theory and all the things that are going on behind the scenes. Genetics and microbiology. But there's another technology that you may not be tracking, and that's the tracking of robotics. And robotics has been held back by a particular problem that has finally yielded in some surprising results. In robotics, the challenge has been, strangely, creating synthetic skin. In other words, so that a robot can tell whether it's picking up a wine glass or a bowling ball. They now have found a way to make skin so sensitive it can feel the footprint of a fly. And that's broken through, allowing all kinds of innovations to take place in robotics. There's another area that's called nanotechnologies. And that's the goal there is to make machines that are the size of a molecule. Tiny, tiny machines. And that field is leapfrogging forward in some surprising ways. But the fourth, to tie this all together in a strange way, is a field which, for lack of another term, we'll call artificial intelligence. I can remember in the Rand days, in those days, the big argument, can a machine think? So they got around that by saying, well, can it simulate cognitive behavior? That got away the philosophical arguments. The point being, though, that the artificial intelligence technology has been advancing phenomenally in some ways that will surprise you. But the main point that's emerging here is that all 4 of these are advancing to help each other, so to speak, because one influences the other. And so we call this emergence transhumanism. We're moving into the post-human era, where the human body can be extended in ways that go far beyond its original design. Transhumanism. It has very strange aspirations of its own and priorities that will surprise you. And we want to understand those. And from that, we want to get some grasp of the dangers, quite independent of the reason we're looking at it this particular day. So bear with me here. Machine enhancements. It is now possible to make enhancements to artificial limbs that go far beyond our previous imagination. They no longer use pulleys and hydraulics. They can make extensions of the human predicament all kinds of ways. They have found a way to make bionic muscle. Not gears and levers, but literal muscles that's 100 times more powerful than the human muscle. Synthetic muscle, if you will. And so they're made, and how they do it isn't important. This discussion, we'll just go ahead. It's in your notes if you want to double back on it. They're also starting to study the direct limb-to-brain communication. How does a limb know when to move and how? And so these limitations have increasingly been relieved by a variety of advanced research. The nanotechnology, I was on the board of NanoPower for many years, and this involves the manufacture and manipulation of materials that are at the molecular level, if you will, the smallest things that you can imagine. And they're measured in billionths of a meter. A nanometer is a billionth of a meter. And a sheet of paper is 100,000 nanometers thick, to give you some feeling of what we're dealing with here. And so these have enormous effects on everything we do, and they're moving on. Because it's possible for a molecule-sized machine in your body to find a location and administer a drug with a 10,000 to 1 focus So you can do much more, much easier, and much more safely, strangely enough. But the other area that is moving wildly is artificial intelligence in many, many fronts. It's blurring the distinctions between man and machine. We're now blurring the distinction between man and machine. You with me so far? Okay. You know, it's interesting, for many, many years, in the early days of the computer industry, which I remember well, the issue was, you know, what can a machine do best? What can a man do best? And we were always asking the wrong question. The real question is, how can they together do it best? And it turns out to generate a whole different set of answers. And so they now have brain scans that are being studied to try to understand how the brain actually handles thoughts. And there's research going on that, especially at Princeton University's Neuroscience Institute. And they're discovering they can begin to detect the patterns of thoughts non-invasively. They don't have to get in your brain to be able to map those things. There are commercial retail products that are aimed at this. Mindset has a family of things that allows it. You can get a headset that will measure your brain waves. It's used for research and for games. It's harmless in the sense that it's non-invasive. And over 300 universities are using these things as products in their research. So those things are available. Haier, the TV company in China, is producing a television set in which you change channels by thinking about them. Spooky stuff, but and that's in the retail market. The Army has mind control projects in which they are trying to develop thought helmets so that a squad leader can communicate to a squad by thought, not by voice. And that sounds bizarre, but they're not there yet, don't misunderstand me, but they believe that's an attainable goal and are letting contracts in that direction. And so we can go on. The other area in which a lot's going on is called BCIs, the brain-to-computer interface. How does your brain connect to a computer directly? Not audio or, motivate. How do we do that? And there are partially invasive BCIs that are implanted in the skull, but rest outside the brain rather than within the gray matter. They try to connect with that and learn things about it. And they find they learn things that way. They also have computers now that are designed to learn, not just self-modifying software, no, much more deeper than that. Experimental computer chips for our next generation brain-inspired computers that are capable of learning from what's going on around them. Cognitive computing, they call it, and on it goes. And so the IBM people are in that. They've also partnered with 3M, creating layered chips that are 1,000 times faster because they can layer it to get rid of the heat. The problem is the energy per billion thoughts. And so it's not only a question of making it more powerful, it's a question of making it smaller and more energy efficient. And so they're going through all of that. So on it goes. But they're looking at 1,000-to-1 improvements is the point. So the power of computers is continuing to accelerate. These improvements in each of these four technologies are not only moving faster, the rate at which they're moving is increasing. And it's staggering in terms of what's happening here. Their size, energy, and costs continue to diminish. The facility of software continues to accelerate and expand. And they're heading for a day that is, according to Ray Kurzweil, who's one of the very followed gurus in this area, he uses a strange term. He actually misuses a mathematical term, but that's not the point. He is predicting a time he calls the singularity. What he means by that, the day is coming when the computer's capability will exceed that of a human being. And he calls that the singularity. He's predicting that not a few decades away, a few years away. We're that close, he believes. And he's got a record here of being really on track in his previous. He's a multimillionaire because he's been able to predict technology moves very, very skillfully. And he's the one that his book is The Singularity is Near, meaning this time when the computer will outclass the human being in what it does is coming very closely here. And he's the acknowledged guru. So when computational intelligence exceeds that of the human mind. Staggering, staggering goal. Now here's the staggering part of that, the aspiration of these people. These are not dumbbells. These are people at the cutting edge of our most advanced technologies. You with me so far? Okay. They believe the day is coming when it's possible to exchange consciousness between bodies. That which makes up your consciousness can be transferred to a machine environment that's even richer than your own. What that means is immortality. Because your consciousness can be translated into a machine, and that machine is superior in many ways to the human machine. You have a consciousness in a different environment. And there's no reason that couldn't be transferred to a different environment as it improves. Strangely enough, it's a path to immortality. And that sounds bizarre to the uninformed. The more informed you are on this, the more attainable that looks. But that raises some very, very bizarre questions. And so the path towards immortality, can you imagine? While all this is going on, you need to be aware of a group called the Jasons. Now, this isn't some spooky cult exactly. It's something quite different. It's an independent group of scientists. It's our strongest brain trust available that advises the United States government on matters of science and technology. They're called the Jasons. First created as a way to get younger generation of scientists to replace the older generation, Los Alamos and MIT Radiation Lab and all those people. And so it was established in 1960, and it's somewhere between only 30 and 40 members, but they are the brain trust available to the United States. And they do their classified activities primarily administered through the MITRE Corporation. Now they have highly classified priority agenda that drives a widespread global arms race. What's coming out of these technologies is a race. It's hidden, it's highly classified but obvious. The major development countries, China, Europe, Russia, the United States, are racing to be the first to develop the super soldier. The human that is advanced, exploiting all these techniques to be the ultimate soldier. Faster, more powerful, fill in the comic book imaginations, they're all attainable. And so it's widely acknowledged to be, among the informed, that the next era to develop is what some people are calling the age of the hybrids. The hybrids. You won't be fighting a soldier, you'll be fighting a hybrid of some kind that has been enhanced with the technologies that are out of the laboratory. And that's from the emergence of genetics, robotics, nanotechnology, and artificial intelligence. Do you begin to realize with that kind of money behind the technologies, pushing them even faster and further, it's a race. It's a hidden race to those who are informed, highly classified. And so, super soldiers armed with ultimate weapons, network super leaders with unlimited mind controls, unenforced lawlessness among a privileged few is the result, will ultimately be the result. And consciousness exchanges offering a form of immortality. And out of all this, there are even people talking about a collective consciousness which will usher in the utopian collective. If you've seen, there's been a documentary released to movie theaters in the U.S. called The Singularity on Ray Kurzweil. And they tell about his life and what his beliefs are. But the final scene is so telling. They ask Ray Kurzweil, "Do you believe there's a God?" And his answer is a simple one. He says, "Not yet." They actually believe that what God will be the result of somehow collectively putting these things together. Now, so these nanotechnologies, their goal is molecule-sized machines. Robotics, self-modifying sentient machines. Machines that can not only think in some way, they can modify themselves. That's the goal of robotics. That's what they're chasing. Genetics, of course, the self-replication of manipulated entities. They are talking about being able to design diseases that can single out not only just a certain class of person, a specific person. Bizarre stuff. Bizarre stuff. Directable diseases targeting specific groups or individuals. And then, of course, artificial intelligence exceeding the human mind. This is the world that's emerging on our horizon, and it's not a decade away. 3, 4, 5 years are the common estimates by people who are knowledgeable here. This is coming in spades. And the whole mentality of the population is unprepared for this because they're uninformed. And so that's why we're bringing this up for a number of reasons, okay? The composite goal, self-replicating sentient machines that have superior and overwhelming combatant strengths, the transfer of consciousness between and to exterior bodies. What does that mean? Sounds like science fiction, doesn't it? It's worse than that. It has some other implications. A path towards immortality. Now, can you imagine these things in the hands of certain people that are heading for global tyranny? What would have happened if these technologies would have been available to a Hitler or a Stalin or a whomsoever? That's what we're facing. Now, see, part of the thing you need to realize is that I can't see you out there. I can only see the temporary residence you're in. The real you, call it soul, spirit, conscious, whatever label, that's vocabulary, whatever. You are temporarily resident in a disposable hardware environment. And technology looks like it may free you from the limitations of that environment. Why shouldn't it be possible? In fact, preferable to transfer into an advantageous environment, a machine-enhanced environment. It defies the imagination. And what would limit you from pursuing a continuing path of subsequent upgrades? Provocative, isn't it? A path to immortality. That's really what Ray Kurzweil talks about with the singularity. When machines exceed human capabilities, the transfer of total consciousness into a machine environment, that boggles the mind. From one and then another, who knows? Can composite consciousness lead to a supra-consciousness? Some people would call that God in some form. That's Ray Kurzweil's fabulous response to does God exist? He says, not yet. That's his mindset, and he's serious about it. He's serious about it. So obviously there's some dangers here we want to be aware of, quite independent of our topic this afternoon. And the trouble with these things is they ignore a region that I call the metacosm. Now that's a concept I've discovered is essential to get across if you're going to develop a serious worldview today. That there are boundaries to our reality. If you take what we really know about our physical reality, it's astonishing where you come out. Let's take this symbol of Da Vinci's vituperative man as a symbol of man's reach. I'll use that in my little diagram here. That's man's reach. Now anything, and I'm going to have size increase to the right on the diagram. So if I go left, I'm going smaller. If I go right, I'm going bigger. I want to explore that which is larger than us. Okay, I'm going to collectively call that region the macrocosm. And as we explore that in our thinking and awareness, that plunges into this discussion of astronomy and astrophysics and all that. Bigness. The great discovery of 20th century science is that the universe is finite. It is not infinite. Staggeringly important. It may be expanding, but it's limited. It's finite. So the fact that the universe is finite, we could spend some time to develop, but that fact we need to understand is reality on the large size. You with me so far? Okay, let's go the other way. Let's explore smallness. And it gets even stranger, because we call that the microcosm. Let's examine things smaller than ourselves. You would think there's no limit to smallness. But we discover that, see, if I take a length like a piece of string, I can cut it in half and take what's left and cut it in half. And you think that mentally I could do that forever. It might get too small to really do it, but I could imagine whatever I've got left, I can cut in half. And I discover that's not true. It turns out that length, when I get smaller than 10 to the minus 35 centimeters, if I try to split it, it loses a property called locality. And I discover, if I'm in quantum physics, I discover the bizarre reality that whether you're talking about length, mass, energy, or time, there's a limit to smallness. They call those quanta. There's a quantum limit. Planck's constant. You're against what I call Planck's wall. If you try to get smaller than that, there's no unit of time smaller than 10 to the minus 43 seconds. That's very, very small. But what's provocative is to discover, and they now know it's true, that there's no unit of time. Time is made up of indivisible units. Energy, indivisible units. Length, indivisible units. They call them quanta to collectively talk about them, but that plunges you into the discovery of quantum physics and subatomic particles. And the thing that you need to discover there is that smallness is made up of units you cannot divide. We are in a digital simulation. There are units you can't split. One of the original physicists first discovered that committed suicide because he couldn't handle the implications of that. And indeed, the more you study quantum physics, the more bizarre it gets. And I won't try to get into all that here. But what we know today, if you pull your facts together, you'll discover that we now know that we're living in a digital simulation, a virtual environment. And it has limitations of largeness, it's finite, and it has limitation of smallness. In the Scientific American, June of 2005, there's an article about the constants of physics, which are apparently changing, and their conclusion. If the constants of physics are changing, and they are, that implies, their words, not mine, that our reality is but a shadow of a larger reality. Really? Yes, that's what the Bible has been saying from the beginning. And that's one of the things I want to do is I really want to codify this into a meaningful book, because I think that if building our worldview from what we know physically cuts through all the nonsense and brings us to truth faster than dealing with the lies and the deceit that constitute our curricula in most colleges. This area, the macrocosm, is a subset of a larger reality, and I'm going to call that larger reality, to be consistent, the metacosm. And it's the metacosm that's the region that we find things like angels, fallen and otherwise. That's the region of demons. We now know that that's the region of the UFOs. I'll come to that before we're through, because they're very, very strange. We know they're real because they're physical. They show up in multiple radars simultaneously. They leave evidence behind like radiation and burnt ground. So they're real in one sense, and yet, they make right-angle speeds at speeds that are just absurd. They can materialize and dematerialize at will. Where are they when we don't see them? Those are issues that have been well researched by serious people, and the thing you'll discover, that region of interest is the most highly classified area of military intelligence you have. It shocked me I spent 30 years in the strategic arena, and it shocked me to discover that there are, the mystery about UFOs and Roswell isn't what happened to Roswell. The mystery about Roswell, why is it after 60 years still classified? What on earth is going on? Scientific American, June of 2005, our universe is but a shadow of a larger reality. That's not a speculation, that's a conclusion by people in the know, strangely enough. Transhumanism. See, the trouble with transhumanism that we've been profiling here, it ignores the reality of a metacosm, because there is something larger than our physical reality. We're a subset of the whole thing. There is a supernatural warfare going on in the metacosm. And you and I are both the puppets and the prize. We're the puppets in that world in many ways. And we apparently are also the prize for mysteries that mystify us all. When we open a channel into our software, call it soul, spirit, whatever, it yields an access permission that is not reversible. I remember very vividly when a movie came out called The Exorcist by William Blatty. And I was on Walter Martin's board in those days. And Walter set out to discredit William Blatty, only to discover that William Blatty had done his homework, that novel was based on primarily 2 real case studies. It wasn't a gal, it was a guy in New Jersey, but that's not important. It was based on actual case study research. Walter didn't like the way the novel ended, but the point is he was shocked to discover that William Blatty had done his homework. And if you remember the bizarre events there, they all started by a young girl playing with a Ouija board, indulging what is called technically an entry. Those entries are tame compared to the entries that are available with video games, with the role-playing games, the ways that the spirit world can get you to invite them in. Like birth control, it's not retroactive. See, the thing that the transhumanism ignores is that we have an accountability to the master designer himself. And this is dealt with for us. It gives us a clue there in Genesis 11. We'll look. God has limited boundaries. There are God-appointed limits to human arrogance. And we'll explore one to get the flavor of this in Genesis 11. In Genesis chapter 11, it says, the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said one to another, go to, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone and slime they had for mortar. And they said, go to, let us build us a city and a tower, whose top may reach into heaven. And let us make a name, lest we be scattered upon the face of the whole earth. Don't look at this naively like a Sunday school coloring book. They're not building a tower they think they can climb up to heaven in a figurative sense. They're doing it in a literal sense. They're doing it in a figurative sense. What they're building, in effect, is a combination temple astrological entity to reach beyond themselves. That's what they're trying to do. Okay? And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower, which the children of men builded. And I wonder who, it says, and the Lord said, I wonder who he's talking to. The Lord said, behold, the people is one, and they have one language. And this they begin to do. And notice the conclusion. And now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Don't let that phrase slip by. The concept that God, he's drawing a line in the sand. He won't let them be unrestrained to do anything they imagine to do. The question is, who's he talking to? And those of you that have done your homework know the answer is in Psalm 2. And the second Psalm is a trilogue between the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. On this very issue, by the way. And now nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do. Go to verse 7. Go to, let us go down. Notice the us. That's in the Hebrew in the plural. That's in the plural, by the way. Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of the earth, and they left off to build the city. I want to remind you that in Hebrew, a plurality is not 2, it's 3. So you can chew on that a little bit. Therefore, it is the name of it called Babel. That's the tower to God. El is God, the Bab is the tower to God. because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face. This is another example where the Holy Spirit uses puns. Babel, the tower to God, becomes Babel. They didn't understand each other. Do you see there's a pun there? That's not incidental. You'll discover in Hebrew that's designed. People say, well, Hebrew lends itself to wordplay. Absolutely. It was designed to. Let's not be surprised that we discover in your Bible there are a number of different rhetorical devices. Do you know how many different kind? Over 200 different kinds, and they've been cataloged for you. What they are and where they're used. You'll find it in the appendix to Cosmic Codes is one place they're around. Okay. Let's get back to the broader topic, the advent of the hybrids. That's what we're facing here. And of course, that term really has its origin, a biblical origin, in Genesis chapter 6. And I'm stunned with how many times I get a phone call from people who've graduated from seminary with a master's or a doctorate, who are angry, not at me, but they're angry because they've discovered that when they were in seminary, they were never taught of the existence of the angel view of Genesis 6. You would think there's several different views. There's one called the Sethite view that's commonly taught, and the error is it's wrong, at least in 12 specific ways. The error is they don't teach the alternatives. It's not like, say, here's one view, here's another. They don't do that. They should, they don't. And many people who graduated from seminary are shocked and upset because they discover that they were never even aware of the classic view, the biblical view of Genesis 6, and also Numbers 13, and also Revelation 9. Those are all tied together. And relax, I'm not going to try to review all of that here this morning. But we do want to take a look at Genesis chapter 6, the first two verses, and I want to call your attention to something all the experts miss. Those two verses are one sentence. And it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the Benai Elohim, the sons of God, saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. What you know is those two verses are one sentence. The sons of God, that's a technical term in the Hebrew. It refers to a direct creation of God. Adam was a direct creation of God. His descendants were not. They were sons of Adam. Okay, you get to the whole Y-codism thing and all that. I won't get into that here, but the Benai Elohim, the sons of God, is a term used exclusively in the Old Testament of direct creation of God, which usually means an angel, because they were direct creation. They don't procreate. They neither die nor procreate. And the daughters of men, that's not the daughters of Seth, it's daughters of men in general. There have been contrived twistings of this in the 5th century A.D. that have become standard fare in the seminaries, and the truth isn't taught anymore. When you get to verse 4 of chapter 6, there were Nephilim in the earth, and the word Nephilim is the key word there, Nephilim. There was Nephilim in the earth in those days, and also after that, not just then, but another time later. When the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown, the Hagi-Barim. And so, in Genesis 15, it happens a second time, and that confuses a lot of people. And also after that, meaning it wasn't limited. The occasion in Genesis 6 is taken care of by the flood of Noah. But when you get to Genesis 15, it happens again in the land of Canaan, and that's why Joshua is instructed to wipe out every man, woman, child of 4 tribes to get to deal with the gene pool problem there. The Nephilim. The word actually in the Hebrew comes from the verb naphal, which means the fallen ones, to be cast down and fall and so forth. The Hagi-Barim are the mighty ones. In the Septuagint, the Greek, it's translated gigantes. Yes, they were giants, but that's not what the word means. They were giants, but no, the word gigantes means earthborn, from gigos for earth. And so there's some very important exegetical backgrounds you want to have by getting into that. Now, when you get to verse 9 of Genesis 6, it says, these are the generations of Noah, and generations usually means his family tree. He says, Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations, and Noah walked with God. Now, the word perfect there is the word tamim in the Hebrew, meaning free of physical defects. What it's saying here is that Noah had a genealogy that was unblemished by this chicanery that's going on by the fallen angels. Tamim means without blemish, sound, healthful, without spot, unimpaired. Now, can angels have sex? Many people get confused by Matthew 22:30 or Mark 12:25, because Jesus says, for in the resurrection, speaking of angels, in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels of God in heaven. All he's saying is the angels in heaven don't procreate. He doesn't say they can't. He isn't imposing some kind of physical limit on the kind of mischief that fallen angels can fall into. So many people get confused by that. And there's a lot behind that. We can go spend more time on it. There's a technical term that shows up called okaterion. And it's a term referring to the body as a dwelling place for the spirit. And we see it only twice in the Bible. It's only twice in the Bible. It's that from which the angels had disrobed in Jude 6. The fallen angels disrobed from that in order to indulge in the mischief they were involved in. But it also is a term used to the heavenly body that you and I aspire to be clothed with in 2 Corinthians 5:2. So I submit to you that that's used as a technical term in the Scripture. But we're going to move on. Well, it's just Jude 6:7. The angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, their okaterion, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness, under the judgment of the great day. Even as Sodom and Gomorrah and the citizens about them in like manner, giving themselves over to fornication and going after strange flesh, are set forth in his example, suffering the vengeance of eternal fire. It's interesting that Jude even makes a parallel between the sins of Sodom and Gomorrah and the sins of the fallen angels. Do you get that? Do you pick up on that? Okay. Habitation. That's this term okaterion again. The positive in 2 Corinthians 5:2. For we know that if our earthly house of this tabernacle were dissolved, we have a building of God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. For in this we groan, earnestly desiring to be clothed upon with our house, which is from heaven. We're not interested in any singularity of Ray Kurzweil. Our master designer has way ahead of him. Oh, again, okaterion. Okay. But it may surprise many that to understand there are also Nephilim that were after Noah's flood. And it said so, that would be after that. And the Rephaim, the Emim, the Horim, and the Zamzummim are 4 tribes in Genesis 14 and 15 that Joshua was instructed to wipe out every man, woman, and child. And he didn't quite complete the job. Arba, Anak, and his 7 sons, known as the Anakim, are encountered in Canaan in Numbers 13. Okay. In Deuteronomy 3, we encounter Og, the king of Bashan, and he shows up in Joshua 12. He is a king of the giants. He's huge. And then there's Goliath, who has 4. When David goes through the brook, he picks up 5 stones in his pocket, remember? And it only took 1 to take Goliath. What were the other 4 for? He had 4 brothers. Think about that. That's great. We talked earlier about the famous visions, both of Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel 2 and the one that Daniel himself had in Daniel 7, speaking of these empires, Babylon, Persia, Greece, and then the iron mixed with clay. And what we didn't get into particularly there, but when you look at this imagery, when Daniel interprets chapter 2, he explains what that miry clay is supposed to be talking about. It's obviously a metaphor, but of what? And Daniel says, and whereas, he's speaking to Nebuchadnezzar, whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. What on earth is Daniel saying to Nebuchadnezzar? They, he switches to a personal pronoun. They, whoever they are, to show what? They shall mingle themselves with the what? Seed of men. Wait a minute. Both grammatically and biologically, we got a problem here. Because the they must be something other than the seed of men in order to mingle with them. So whatever they are, they're not the seed of men. Do you realize what that verse is saying? Somehow, some way, that's an allusion to something we don't quite grasp. What is it? Are they Nephilim? Could be. Are they clones? Could be. Are they aliens of some kind? Could be. They, whoever they are, and they're apparently large enough plurality to constitute a significant segment of the population. The iron mixed with clay. It's not a couple, it's a lot. They shall mingle themselves with the seed of men. Really? Something's going to get introduced here that won't cleave, won't work? What is he talking about? There's a clue here that's gigantic. Are these hybrids, is the question. Are they Nephilim? Could be. Or are they aliens of some other kind? Could be. It's an illusion that won't go away. Now, this leads us, of course, Jesus said, as the days of Noah were, so shall the days of the coming of the Son of Man be. To understand what Jesus meant, we have to understand what the days of Noah were like. And when we study the days of Noah, we discover there are all these weird things going on with the fallen angels. So that introduces us to the whole subject of UFOs, strangely. Because the UFOs have been seen and are increasing so much so they're not even reported anymore in the paper. Now, by the way, this is an area of research that's one of the toughest areas to research that I know of, having done a lot of work in it. And I can tell you the latest book by Tom Horn, Exo-Vaticana, is the most thorough, scholastic, in-depth review of this area, among other things, that I've ever seen in print. So if you're interested in getting up to speed quickly, getting a copy of his book is one of the fastest way. Because the real problem is, real evidence survives the screening of false data. When you go through this area and you get rid of the false data and the hoaxes and the nonsense, there's a lot of that. When you brush that all away, what's left is real evidence that you cannot deny. Knowledgeable people and tangible evidence. That's the scary part. You suddenly realize that despite all the noise and foolishness, there's something in there that's real. There are physical evidences they leave behind. And yet, the problem is they violate physical laws. They're physical in the sense they show up in multiple radars simultaneously. They leave radiation behind and burnt ground. They're real. And yet, they make right-angle turns at thousands of miles per hour, something you could not physically do. They go faster than the speed of sound without sonic booms. They violate physical laws. That's the mystery. We do know now that they are not intergalactic. Those ideas have finally been dismissed by anybody that's redone the homework. They appear to be interdimensional. You're looking at transdimensional behavior somehow. We've been all trained with Euclidean geometry, three spatial lengths with height, 3 dimensions. Einstein has graduated us into a 4-dimensional space-time. Great. And there's more than that. It looks like the current estimates are there's 10 different dimensions out there. Something else we know about the UFOs now today, they have an agenda of deceit. That's a huge, huge milestone in the research. And the two guys that are best known, who've devoted their lives to researching this area, have concluded that they're demonic in origin. And Jacques Vallée is the Frenchman, born in 1939, author, venture capitalist, currently residing in San Francisco. And J. Allen Hynek is the American. These two guys are well known within the field. And in mainstream science, Vallée was notable for co-developing the first computerized mapping of Mars and for his work with SRI International in helping create the ARPANET from which we got the internet. He is a non-trivial scientific contributor. And he is also an important figure in the study of UFOs and so on and so forth. J.A. Hynek is well known. He's the American, and he's passed away now. But he was a professor. He was the scientific advisor on UFO studies for the U.S. Air Force. under 3 consecutive names, under Project Sign in 49, the Project Grudge in 52, and the Project Blue Book. He was one of the principal contributors to all of those. He devoted his life after that to independently studying this area. And he's the one that's really considered the father of the concept of scientific analysis of reports, and especially trace evidence that apparently is purposely left back by the UFOs. So these are informed perspectives. They're not intergalactic, but they're transdimensional. Fair enough. Neither one of these guys, by the way, had any theological orientation, and yet both of them came to the conclusion that the UFOs are deliberately deceptive and they're not beneficial, although they pose to be. Jacques Vallée and J. Allen both concluded that they appear to be demonic, and those are their words. And Tom Horn and Chris Putnam published a book called Exo Vaticanum, and I recommend it very, very highly. And not because I did the introduction. They did solicit me to do that, and I was glad to do it because I'm quite impressed with the quality of their work. But they also acknowledge that some of that, we had some origin in it. So the point is, but they believe that all of the thing that we're watching is a prelude to a forthcoming cosmic delusion by the prince of the power of the air. That's the net bottom line for you going into this. The days of Noah. The mystery of Roswell is why is it still classified to this day? And we could spend a lot of time on this, the whole idea that in the press releases with the Air Force, they were subsequently embarrassed because one of the memos one of the guys was holding was readable years later by advanced digital technology. And they were holding memos that talk about the victims of the wreck of what landed. See, something landed in Roswell that was sealed and sent off to Wright Pat Air Base. And we now know that there were apparently victims of that wreck. The legends are there were 4 bodies, one was still alive. But whatever it is, we don't know about. Why is it classified to this day? That's the big mystery. MJ-12. I believe MJ-12 is real and exists. The fact that its documentation surfaced and is subsequently discredited is just a clever way to hide it. There are 2 kinds of people today, those that never heard of MJ-12 and those that know it was just a hoax back 20 years ago. No, there's a third possibility, that it was surfaced as a hoax in order to make it disappear, and it's worked. But behind all of this is the spooky part of the abductions. When you start studying UFOs carefully, you discover there's something else that's going on that's really, really disturbing. And that is the plurality of people who have had no prior psychiatric history, have no desire for this to be published, who clearly are subject to some trauma, and their stories are too bizarre to accept and yet too consistent to ignore, where they apparently are abducted, subjected to medical procedures of data gathering, and then discarded. Strange stuff, strange stuff. Travis Walton affair was made into a movie. Betty, when I remember when we came out with the book some time ago and I was radio interviewed, I got a call from a producer in Hollywood who said, Chuck, I heard you on the radio and I agree with what you said until you said that a Christian cannot be abducted. You got to recheck the affidavit of Betty Andreessen. I was so startled by the call, I was amazed, but I did. I double-checked. And Betty Andreessen, 20 years in a spirit-filled fellowship, some creatures apparently showed up by her bedside, and they invited her, and she accepted their invitation. That's not an abduction. You say I'm making a technicality, maybe so, but anyway. Dr. John Mack, head of Harvard's psychiatric activity, had a conference at MIT that he co-chaired, and they smoked out all kinds of professionals, and the question was, what's going on? Mack's challenge to the conference is that what these people, he dealt with over 176 cases personally. He says what these people are saying, if what these people are saying are happening to them isn't happening, what is? The stories are too bizarre to even repeat, and yet they're so consistent you can't ignore them. And that was his challenge to the conference. And he wrote a book on abductions. It's available. You can check it out. He since has passed away, unfortunately. Well, in all these things, of course, I've used the 7 epistles of Christ as my backbone. That's the profile we have from the Lord himself, 7 letters that lay out, strangely enough, the history of the church in advance. And we have the first 3 that are postscripted. We have the last 4 that explicitly relate to the second coming. And, of course, Thyatira we've talked about. We're going to talk more about that in the next session. And that will really surprise you when we get into that. And, of course, Philadelphia's promised an exit from all of that. And we have the problematic aspect of Sardis and Laodicea. Where are we with respect to transhumanism? Clearly, we are in the apostate church. We are at the end of the chain. So I'm not setting dates, don't misunderstand me, but we are in the final curtain we're in Act 7 of a 7-act play. And what we're facing is what some people call the satanic trio. We have Satan, of course, who's behind it all. We have the beast, as he's called in Revelation, and the false prophet. And remember, the last 2 are a duet. Revelation 13, remember, I beheld another beast coming out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake like a dragon. So from that, we conclude he probably was Jewish, because he certainly was accepted by Israel. You can study those on your own. And he exercised all the power of the first beast for harm, causing the earth and them that dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed, and so on. And the power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, and cause that as many as would not worship the beast to be killed. Now we start reading these verses from the point of view of transhumanism, and we begin to wonder, gee, is that image somehow empowered directly to cause the death of those that don't worship? Our technology horizon has been extended here a little bit. He had the power to give life to the image. What does that really mean? We don't know. And cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed? Wow. And then he causes both small and great, rich and poor, bond and free, to receive the mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, that no man may buy or sell save that he have a mark, and so forth. And don't forget whose number. It's his number, not ours, that's the issue here. And I have a little reading list. Exo Vaticana, if you really want to get up to speed in the most scholarly treatment I've ever seen of a very difficult subject, I take my hat off to these 2 guys. We published a book some years ago, as you know, Alien Encounters, as I mentioned. Douglas Hamp has done an excellent book called The Corrupting the Image, which deals with the genetics of the Nephilim and so forth. Does a terrific job. Excellent, excellent piece of work. Tom Horn's earlier book, Pandemonium Engines, deals with all of this. See, the issue is the metacosm, because that's the real reality, not the physical universe that we experience as a simulation. Our perceived reality is just a virtual one. We need to understand that. And you and I are in the midst of a warfare. We're both the pawns and the prizes. And our eternal destinies are in jeopardy here. Let's understand that. And the question here, we're spending a weekend together to probe at some of these topics. The question is, what's your action plan? We're not here to sell a particular view. I think you understand that. We're here to understand what the horizon looks like. But out of this should be more than some gee whiz notes for the bookshelf. What should come out of this weekend, before you leave tomorrow, is a personal action plan. What does that mean? I'm going to suggest that you and I have no capacity to second guess the answers to the questions that we posed. We pose the questions because we think they're constructive. Can we really formulate the answer? Not a chance. Because what's coming is the most skillfully planned delusion Satan's ever hatched. What we can do is deal with our personal spiritual hygiene to prepare for the coming turmoil. And so we want to understand the armor of God. That is our resource. Now, there are vulnerability factors. I've extracted this from a book on the UFO things. It's interesting, there are things that will increase your vulnerability to the troubles that are coming. One of those is some form of idolatry in the family background within your previous 4 generations. Have you examined those? Have you discounted them? Have you denied them? Have you rejected that unknown background in your personal genealogy? Most of us don't know our background. Okay, no problem. You can claim your background for Christ. You can have the forces of darkness purged. And there are obvious examples of this in demonic religions: Hindu, Buddhist, Native American, Voodoo, Scientology, New Age groups. Those are all deadly, deadly poisons. Also parlor games, Ouija boards, Dungeons and Dragons, role-playing, and the video games that are going on. Astonishing implications. And don't overlook or dismiss more subtle forms of idolatry, as rebellion, arrogance, immorality, impurity, greed, gluttony, you name it. Sins of the mind, where the person does not retain control over his thoughts, is an area of hygiene. Drug use is an obvious example. Transcendental meditation, occultism is another. Hypnosis, uncontrolled anger, these are all vulnerability factors. Attitudinal issues, excessive guilt or sorrow. There's answers for all of these biblically. Pride and arrogance, of course. Lack of sexual self-control, lack of mental peace, disobedience, secular values, insolence. If these don't convict you, you're not paying attention. We all have these problems, and the resources are in our laps. The Word of God. Breaking marriage vows, casting off early faith, being idle. Wow. A busybody, tattler, malicious talk. These are all in the script. You can go through this checklist on your own, in private, pray it through. Volitional participation with demons or the spirit world in a non-biblical context. Wow. That clearly is hazardous with an underscore. So what can you do about these things? Explicit renunciation of any or all of the above before the throne of God. In your private time, tonight, tomorrow, take that before the throne of God and go through your list. There's a 24-hour hotline available anytime. And it's accessible from the privacy of your own will through prayer. Take advantage of it. Ask to receive the benefits of the completed action of Jesus Christ on your behalf. Undertake a specific commitment to the serious study of the Bible as the inerrant Word of God. Doesn't that sound like a cliche? No. No, no. It should be a commitment that you should not let this day close without. Make a diligent effort to put on the whole armor of God. Spend time with God in prayer every day. We all talk about it. Few of us really do it regularly enough. Identify and participate in a fellowship of Christian believers in which the teaching of the entire Bible receives the primary priority. How absent that is from so many lives. Flee any cult groups that do not restrict their allegiance and authority to the Word of God or in some other way deny the deity of Christ. Don't let that linger in your life if it's there. Now, if you get an encounter, reject any invitations, deny any requests, and flee any involvement. If any of you see a UFO, don't chase it. Don't chase it. Take command and plead the blood of Jesus Christ. They may try to bluff you. You think I'm being overdramatic? No. Understand your ground and your authority. Take command and plead the blood of Christ on your behalf. They have to flee, and they will. One of the things that will just shock you is to discover how terrified they are of the authority of Christ. If you rely on Him, you're in a position of absolute authority. Don't allow yourself to be bluffed. I'll give you some anecdotal examples, but it's not to the point. And what you then want to do is seek prayer and counsel for someone you know who clearly has an adequate biblical background. Don't guess about that. Qualify your sources. Build a network you can trust. And for heaven's sakes, don't allow yourself to be hypnotized. That's widely used in the medical profession. It's dangerous. People that practice it have no grasp of what they're doing. It is a warfare. You are a target. The enemy's primary weapon is deception and deceit. And with that, I think we'll have a closing prayer.